They used to chuckle whenever I mentioned flour, butter, and sugar, like they were jewels. My bakery dream, they claimed, was just a childish pastime, something sweet to kill time until I landed a proper job. But dreams have a strange way of proving skeptics wrong. The instant a bit of cash started coming in, my idol brother abruptly declared himself co-founder of all I'd built through restless nights and sore hands. What he and our parents didn't grasp was that for years I'd been silently gathering every receipt, every dollar he swiped, every lie they spun, and every tense dinner where they gazed at him with admiration and at me with sympathy. I wasn't only baking bread. I was crafting a case. And when I finally stepped into that courtroom, my apron might have been off, but the proof I carried could unravel the tangle of lies they'd woven. If you've ever seen the people who should have been your greatest champions turn into your biggest skeptics, then my story will pull at the deepest part of your soul. Hit that like button if you think someone's hard work deserves respect and follow along, because you're about to see the tastiest slice of family betrayal revenge you'll ever savor. My name is Janice, and since I was 6 years old, I've dreamed of owning a small bakery that smelled like comfort itself. While friends were sneaking out to parties, I was in the kitchen at midnight, hands deep in dough, learning through trial and error. I ruined more pies than I sold, but every error taught me something. Every paycheck from my side gigs, washing dishes, folding laundry, went straight into my bakery fund. My parents, Joe and Kathy, never hid their skepticism. My dad worked long hours in construction and saw life in bricks and steel, things you could touch and tally. My mom, a secretary, was practical and careful. "Sweetheart," she'd say, shaking her head with a weary smile. "Baking's a nice hobby, but no one builds a future out of icing." Then there was my brother Isaac, 3 years older, their golden boy. He fixed car engines and boasted about grease-stained hands. To them, he was dependable, normal, safe. I was the odd one who spoke to yeast like it could listen. When I shared one night that I'd been accepted to culinary school, the dinner table froze. "Culinary school?" My father snapped. "That's not education. That's paying someone to teach you to cook." Isaac snickered through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "So what's the plan, Jan? Gonna open a cookie stall?" Their laughter rang louder than the silverware. I didn't laugh. I just worked harder. I took double shifts, sold cupcakes from my car, saved and scrimped until my hands ached. When I earned my first $18 at the farmer's market, my parents rolled their eyes. "A whole day for $18? My mother sneered. "You could earn more typing reports." But $18 turned into $40, $80, $200. Small steps like tiny loaves rising in a slow oven. The day I finally leased a small corner shop downtown, a space just big enough for 2 ovens and a display case, I invited my parents. They didn't show. My father's last words before hanging up that morning were, "Call us when you get a real job." 18 months later, that tiny bakery, Janice's Kitchen, glowed with soft light every morning at 6 a.m. The air smelled of cinnamon. People lined up for fresh croissants, and I could finally breathe without checking my bank balance hourly. I wasn't wealthy, but I was proud. And success, I learned, is like sugar. It attracts attention. Not all of it kind. Isaac started stopping by. First, just once a month. He'd stroll in with a wide grin, offer to haul a sack of flour, maybe grab a coffee to pitch in. He'd wink at customers and say, "Our bakery's doing great." I thought it was just playful until our bakery became his favorite line. Soon he was there daily, shuffling my shelves, chatting with strangers like he owned the place. One Saturday, the busiest day yet, I was swamped. Wedding cake, birthday cupcakes, a pile of orders swirling in my head. Isaac rolled in 2 hours late, reeking of cheap beer and wearing yesterday's bravado. When the crowd eased, I asked quietly, "What's this wee stuff, Isaac? You don't work here." His smile dissolved like sugar in rain. "Wow," he said icily. "You're really ungrateful. Mom and Dad will flip when they hear how you treat family." And he made sure they did. That Sunday dinner was a trap served with roast chicken. My parents were ready, faces set with practiced concern. "Janice," my mother started, "we need to discuss how you're treating your brother." My father nodded. "Isaac's been helping you build that little shop. He deserves credit." Credit? He'd shown up twice a week, maybe to shift boxes and charm buyers, and I'd paid him for it. "Dad," I began, "I value Isaac's help, but it's my bakery." "Family helps family," my mother cut in sharply. And when family helps build something, they earn a share. Then my father landed the blow that hit my core. He deserves a partnership. 50-50ths. That's fair. 50-50ths for carrying flour. I stared at them across that table. Every face familiar but colder than strangers. They didn't see me. They saw a chance. Not my dream, just my profit. I'm not giving up half my business, I said softly. The response was a storm. Ungrateful, my mother snapped. Selfish, my father added. Isaac leaned back, smirking like a king who just claimed a throne. It's fine, he said smoothly. I'll keep helping for now. She'll come around when she sees how much she needs me. That night, back in my small apartment above the bakery, I finally cracked. I cried, not like a victim but like a volcano. Years of buried frustration erupting at once. Then I stopped, dried my face, brewed strong coffee and started plotting. Because I hadn't fought this hard to let anyone take what I'd built from nothing. The next weeks were grueling. My parents appeared at the shop uninvited, acting like they were checking in but really keeping tabs. My mother would smile warmly at customers and say, "This is a family business." My father tossed in ideas that always looped back to Isaac gaining more control. And Isaac, he became insufferable. He reorganized shelves, made promises to clients I didn't approve, and bragged to everyone about our 5-year plan. 5-year plan. The man didn't even own an apron. But what truly shattered me wasn't the talk or the meddling. It was the money. It started so small I almost overlooked it. A few dollars short here and there after hectic days. First, I doubted myself. Hectic days meant fast transactions, quick change, simple errors. But then I watched more closely. The shortages weren't random. They occurred on days Isaac pitched in. They happened when I left him alone up front while I toiled in the back kitchen. They happened regularly, predictably, like clockwork. I upgraded to a better cash register system that logged every sale. The deficits persisted, but now I could pinpoint when they occurred. Always during Isaac's shifts. Always in round sums that hinted at skimming, not miscalculations. When I confronted him, his response was pure manipulation. "Are you really accusing me of stealing?" he said, his voice thick with feigned hurt and shock. "I'm your brother, January. I'm here helping you grow this business, working for next to nothing. And you think I'm robbing you?" He was so persuasive that for a moment I questioned myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the strain of running a business was making me imagine issues that weren't real. But then I found the bank statements. Isaac had opened an account at another bank, assuming I'd never see the records. But in a small town like ours, when your childhood friend Natalie works at the credit union, word gets around. She couldn't legally share his statements, but she could casually note how his deposits oddly aligned with my busiest bakery days. That night, I hired an accountant friend, Diana, to review my books discreetly. What she uncovered hit me like a punch to the gut. Over 8 months, nearly $12,000 had vanished from my register. Not all at once, small amounts carefully spaced, crafted to mimic routine cash handling mistakes. But when Diana pieced it together, the pattern was clear as day. Isaac hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been calculated, almost professional. And my parents, when I finally mustered the nerve to show them the evidence, their reaction was worse than I'd feared. "You're being paranoid," my mother said, brushing it off. "Isaac wouldn't do that. He's family." "Maybe you should check your own bookkeeping," my father suggested. "Running a business is complex. Maybe you're not as sharp with numbers as you thought." But the final blow came from Isaac himself. "Look," he said, lounging in my kitchen like he owned it. "Maybe some money got mixed up. It happens in family businesses. But the answer isn't accusations and distrust. The answer is making this official. Give me the partnership I've earned, and we can sort out any confusion over the finances." A partnership. In exchange for not reporting his theft to the police, he was extorting me, with my parents' full backing. That night I sat in my empty bakery at 2 a.m., surrounded by ovens, mixers, and dreams I'd fought so hard to create. And I made a choice that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight this on their terms anymore. I was going to win it on mine. Planning revenge, I learned, was much like baking. You need the right ingredients, exact measurements, perfect timing, and the patience to let everything come together slowly until it's just right. I started with a foundation, safeguarding what was mine. Initially, I second-guessed myself. Busy days meant rapid transactions, swift change, Easy mistakes. But then I observed more carefully. The shortfalls weren't haphazard. They happened on days Isaac lent a hand. They occurred when I left him alone at the counter while I labored in the back kitchen. They took place consistently, predictably, like a metronome. I switched to an advanced cash register system that recorded every transaction. The losses continued, but now I could trace when they happened, always during Isaac's shifts, always in round figures that suggested skimming, not errors. When I challenged him, his response was sheer manipulation. "Are you actually accusing me of stealing?" he said, his voice heavy with pretend hurt and disbelief. "I'm your brother, January. I'm here helping you expand this business, working for almost nothing, and you think I'm robbing you." He was so convincing that for a moment I doubted myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the pressure of running a business was making me see problems that didn't exist. But then I discovered the bank statements. Isaac had opened an account at a different bank, thinking I'd never see the records. But in a small town like ours, when your old friend Natalie works at the credit union, news travels. She couldn't legally show me his statements, but she could subtly mention how his deposits strangely matched my busiest bakery days. That night, I hired an accountant friend, Diana, to quietly examine my books. What she found struck me like a blow to the stomach. Over 8 months, nearly $12,000 had disappeared from my register. Not all at once, small amounts carefully timed, designed to look like typical cash handling errors. But when Diana put it all together, the pattern was unmistakable. Isaac hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been deliberate, almost professional. And my parents, when I finally gathered the courage to present the evidence, their response was worse than I'd imagined. "You're being paranoid," my mother said, dismissing it. "Isaac wouldn't do that. He's family. Maybe you should review your own bookkeeping," my father suggested. "Running a business is complicated. Maybe you're not as good with numbers as you thought." But the final sting came from Isaac himself. "Look," he said, sprawled in my kitchen like he owned it. "Maybe some money got mixed up. It happens in family businesses. But the solution isn't accusations and suspicion. The solution is making this official. Give me the partnership I've earned, and we can clear up any confusion about the finances." A partnership. In exchange for not reporting his theft to the authorities, he was extorting me, with my parents' full support. That night I sat in my empty bakery at 2 a.m., surrounded by ovens, mixers, and dreams I'd worked so hard to build. And I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight this on their terms anymore. I was going to win it on mine. Planning revenge, I discovered, was a lot like baking. You need the right ingredients, precise measurements, perfect timing, and the patience to let everything develop slowly until it's exactly ready. I began with a foundation, protecting what was mine. I served the lawsuit papers 3 days later. On the day of the hearing, my parents marched into the courtroom like they were attending Isaac's crowning moment. They'd spent weeks telling anyone who'd listened that I was finally seeing reason and giving Isaac the partnership he deserved. Isaac himself looked smug, almost arrogant. He'd worn his best shirt and even combed his hair. He kept whispering to my parents, pointing at me like I was a wayward child finally brought to heel. They had no clue what was coming. When the judge called the case, Isaac's court-appointed lawyer stood and began what he thought would be a straightforward partnership dispute. He painted Isaac as a devoted family member who'd helped build a thriving business and deserved formal acknowledgement. "Your Honor," he said, "my client has invested months of effort and added significant value to this bakery. This is merely about formalizing an existing business relationship." Then it was my turn. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Claire I'd hired because she specialized in business fraud, stood with a folder thick enough to stun an ox. "Your Honor," she began, "this isn't a partnership dispute. This is a case of systematic theft, fraud, and attempted extortion." The first exhibit was Isaac's bank records, showing deposits that matched my missing cash to the cent. The second was security footage of him pocketing money from my register. The third was recorded conversations of him boasting about how much he planned to demand once he officially owned part of my business. But the clincher was my documentation of his actual contributions versus his claims. Isaac had told everyone he'd helped build the bakery from scratch. The evidence showed he'd worked maybe 6 hours a week for 8 months, contributed nothing to startup costs, brought in exactly 3 verifiable customers, and had stolen nearly $12,000. The judge's face grew sterner with each piece of evidence. When Isaac tried to defend himself, his story collapsed instantly. Yes, he'd taken some money, but it was compensation for unpaid work. Yes, he'd claimed to be a partner, but he deserved recognition. Yes, he demanded ownership, but it was only fair. My parents sat in the gallery, watching their golden boy unravel with every word. The ruling was fierce and glorious. Isaac was ordered to repay every stolen cent, plus interest and penalties. His ownership claim was dismissed entirely. The judge also granted my request for a restraining order, barring him from entering my bakery or meddling in my business. But the real victory wasn't the legal win. It was seeing my parents realize their favorite child was a criminal, and their foolish dreamer daughter had just methodically dismantled him in court. The look on their faces was worth every sleepless night, every stolen dollar, every family dinner spent defending my right to exist. I thought that courtroom victory was the end of the story. I was wrong. A week later, my parents appeared at my bakery. For the first time in years, my mother tried to act warm. "Janice, honey," she said, her voice oozing false sweetness, "you can drop the charges now. We can be a family again. Isaac has learned his lesson. He's suffered enough." I nearly burst out laughing. They didn't care when I was working 18-hour days to build something from nothing. They didn't care when Isaac was stealing from me. They didn't care when I was drowning in the stress of running a business while I fighting off their endless demands. But now that their golden son faced real consequences for his actions, suddenly I was family again. "You only remember I'm your daughter when it suits you," I said, meeting their eyes directly. "But I built this bakery without you. I survived Isaac's theft without you. I won that lawsuit without you. And I'll live my life without you too." The shock on their faces was almost laughable. They'd never heard me speak to them like that, with confidence, with finality, with the voice of someone who'd stopped craving their approval. "You don't mean that," my mother said faintly. "Janice, we're your parents," my father added. "No," I replied calmly. "You're Isaac's parents. You made that choice long ago." Then I walked them to the door, locked it behind them, and returned to frosting cupcakes for a wedding order. It was the most serene afternoon I'd had in years. Today, 3 years after that courtroom triumph, my bakery isn't just surviving. It's flourishing beyond my wildest dreams. I've opened a second location in the next town with investors who trust my vision, not my last name. I've hired 4 full-time staff who share my love for crafting something beautiful and delicious. Customers still queue before dawn for my signature sourdough. And every wedding season brings new clients who entrust me with their biggest celebrations. A local newspaper ran a feature on small business success in our community. I keep a copy on my office wall, not because I need the validation anymore, but because it symbolizes something greater than a bakery. It represents the dreams people called impossible, the hobby that became a career, the foolish girl who proved she could build something real. As for Isaac, his reputation in our small town never recovered. Everyone knows he's the guy who tried to steal from his own sister and got caught. He moved 2 towns away after the court case, but news spreads fast in rural communities. Last I heard, he was working at another auto shop, still scraping by, still blaming everyone but himself for his troubles. And my parents? They're strangers now. Strangers who sometimes drive past my bakery and slow down like they might stop, but never do. They chose their side in a war they started and they lost. But I didn't just win that war. I transcended it. Because the sweetest revenge isn't just proving people wrong. It's building a life so beautiful, so successful, so truly yours that their opinions become irrelevant. Every morning when I unlock my bakery doors and smell the fresh bread I baked before sunrise, I think of that teenage girl who dreamed of this moment while her family mocked her silly hobby. She'd be proud of what we built together. Not just the business, but the strength to cut off those who never deserved a place at our table. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to prove your worth to people who've already deemed you worthless, and start proving it to yourself instead. And trust me, that victory tastes sweeter than any pastry I've ever baked. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and cutting off the toxic people who never believed in you. If this story inspired you to pursue your own dreams despite the naysayers, hit that like button and share in the comments a time you had to choose yourself over family. Subscribe for more stories about justice, betrayal, and the power of building something beautiful from nothing. Because sometimes the sweetest victory is the one where you no longer need their approval.